Okay, well, Marcus, thank you so much for joining me on the ODAT Chad podcast.
Hello, thank you.
Yeah, hello. This will be a fun one on video. I'm so happy you were able to join me. We've met kind of in a weird way, just through some sort of online business entrepreneurial networking group,
Yeah,
I guess. And
yeah,
I was like, hey, we're in the same space. We should be friends.
yeah, for sure.
And then I found out that you're in San Francisco, close to my hometown. Have you always
Mhm.
lived there?
No, I'm originally from Portland, Oregon, which is just a smaller San Francisco, right? So, but I
Right.
grew up coming to San Francisco, the Bay Area, because my stepdad was in tech, and we would
Oh,
come here for business, and I just grew up coming here a lot.
interesting. Where did your dad work? Can you say what company he was at?
Well, he worked for years for Intel, and then
Oh,
he started his own business back in like '91, and the Bay Area brings you if you're in technology.
oh,
So
for sure. No, I grew up in
yeah,
Silicon Valley, and it was funny. Probably the first 50 interviews I did were with my friends who were all in. I'm like, what do you do? Well, I'm in technology. And I
yeah,
was like, this is
yeah,
getting old.
yeah,
I need to make some.
yeah. Yeah. I'm
Everyone's
not in
from
tech at all,
Silicon
so
Valley.
yeah,
Yeah. Well, so you have a couple of books. I cannot believe how prolific you are. I mean, so you have your memoir, Junk Knowledge.
yeah.
This is how you
This,
stayed sober.
this guy right here.
There it is.
I
By the
just
way,
changed. I just republished it, so it's a lot cleaner and smoother. My first publication, I had it self-published, and it was just really wonky, and it was my first try at a book.
that's
So
amazing. Congratulations on your
thank you,
books. Yeah,
thank you.
my friend says that I have a book boner. I want to write a book.
Yeah, everybody should.
I know, right? Write your
Yeah,
memoir.
yeah, do
Um,
it.
it's in the works, but let's talk
Cool.
about, we'll talk about yours. And then you
Sure.
wrote the darkest chapter.
The, yeah,
Yeah,
this
a
guy.
messy. Ooh, very nice. Oh, I love it. It's got pills all
Yeah.
over the front.
Yeah,
Um, Freudian slip. A
yeah,
messy guide to dual diagnosis. I think that's so important to talk about. I feel
yeah,
like a lot of people self-medicate. People with dual
mm,
diagnosis self-medicate. So
yeah.
it lands us in strange places, to say the
Hmm.
least. So I usually like to start off with, your experience, strength, and hope, as we say. I'll give you, 15 or 20 minutes to talk about what it was like, what happened, what it's like now, and then I'll pepper you with questions later. Is that okay?
Sure. Yeah, sure.
All right, it's all yours.
Okay. So, yeah, my name is Marcus. I'm an alcoholic, addict, and I recently joined ACA, so Adult Child in Recovery. I'm
Nice.
trying it all, and my sobriety date is November 26th, 2001. So I've got just under about 19 years of sobriety, and I'm 41 years old. I was born January 2nd, 1979. And I was born in just outside of Portland, Oregon, in a smaller suburb, a farm, rural suburb, Hillsboro, Oregon. And I was the first grandchild. I was the first child. My mom is the oldest daughter, so I was the first of a lot of things, which I immediately liked all the attention that I got. I had aunts and uncles and grandparents, and I liked the attention. It just naturally came to me. I wasn't shy or afraid of people. I was just I was like a golden retriever as a kid. And I just like throw the frisbee, I'll go get it. I was a happy kid. And my mother and my biological father got divorced when I was like 18 months old. My biological father is a recovering addict as well. He's been sober since January 2nd, 1983. So he's been sober
Wow.
for a long time, but he's also dual diagnosis. And I know that he doesn't like me to talk too much about it, so I won't say that much about it, but he has his stuff going on. And my mom got remarried when I was 5, just turning 5, right as I was going to kindergarten, to my stepfather, who's a brilliant man, hardworking, very strict, just stepdad, stepson situation. And in the very beginning, things were fun. And then we clashed, and I wanted my mom to myself. And my stepdad just wanted a normal married life with kids. And I wanted all the attention. And that's where it all started, about when I was about 5 years old. I wanted everything to stay the way it was. And
Mhm.
I don't know if that's addict behavior, or if that's codependent behavior, or if it's just a little boy behavior. I don't know what it is, but I took it to the extreme. I was manipulative. I argued with my stepfather constantly. And by the time I was 10, I was depressed. I was just, those are the words that I use. I would be like, Mom, I'm really depressed. And she would just look at me like, you're 10. What are you depressed about? And it just slowly got darker from there. It was just, I got more and more depressed. I was popular at school. I was kind of like Zach Morris at Saved by the Bell. Everybody loved me at school. The teachers thought I talked too much, but they thought I was funny. I was disturbing the class, but I wasn't being a bully, or I wasn't negative. I was just a clown. And, and I was having fun, and then I would go home and the anxiety would start. I would start experiencing anxiety and depression. As an adult, I know what it is, but as a kid, I didn't know what was going on, and I was just not at a good place. And attempted runaways and things like that. And I would hitchhike to Portland at the age of 12. I'd hitchhike. I would just hitchhike, and people would pick me up and take me to the city. And I was like in the 6th grade. And I look back and I'm like, that's weird. But in the moment, I just wanted to escape. And I became an escape artist as a child. And eventually at the age of 15 in the 9th grade, things just got really bad. The arguing got really intense. I was never beaten. I was never molested, or there's none of that stuff going on. It was just me butting heads with my stepdad, and it just came to an end. And after spring break of 9th grade, I just told my mom, I'm living with grandma now. And she just looked at me, and I packed my bags, and the next week I was living with my grandmother, and she kind of adopted me. And my parents, that summer, they moved to Eastern Oregon, John Day, and they bought like a ranch. And so they went with my half brother, who's 6.5 years younger than me. They moved out in the middle of nowhere, and I stayed with my grandmother. And that's when I immediately started drinking and doing drugs. I started drinking every weekend, smoking pot. My drug dealers were my age. They were 16 years old, and they were my age. We became best friends, and we smoked pot and drank together all the time. They lived a street down from me. I was on 4th Street. They were on 3rd. I could run through a person's backyard and be right there at their house. And I, for days at a time, would live in their basement and just party with these guys. And it was a blast as a teenager. But my grandmother was like, where have you been? You know? And my grandma, I just had one rule in the house, 2 rules, like no girls could spend the night, and I could not come home intoxicated. So if I was intoxicated, I would just sleep where I was, whether it would be at a bus stop in Portland or underneath the Burnside Bridge, the skate park, the famous skate park, or at a friend's house. I just knew you can't go home if you're stoned, but I was always stoned by the time I was 17. And then I started doing acid and ecstasy and going to raves and throwing raves and dabbling and dealing a little bit here and there. And I was never arrested, never been to jail. I don't drive. I've never driven a car, so no DUIs. I've never had my license. My goal was just to escape the way I felt, the shame and the embarrassment I felt about running away from home, and my parents being like, okay, bye. There was no like, you're coming with us. It was just like, okay, you do your thing, we're gonna do our thing. It was confusing.
Wow.
And now as an adult, I don't blame my parents for what they did. I was crazy. A lot of people will blame their parents till the day they die. And I think for me, that's not the way to go. And but for years, I was angry at them, and I blamed them for everything. And I smoked and I drank at them, and I would bitch about my parents to my friends when I was stoned. You know, it wasn't attractive. It was messy. And I would drink and use. I would dabble in smoking heroin here and there, but I never got into needles or anything. I never snorted anything in my life. It was just drinking and smoking whatever I could get my hands on. And I would do that from the age of 15 to 22. And every day I did it, and I did it until it wasn't fun anymore. And the parties, some of them were glamorous and sexy. I got into modeling, did some work here and there. I traveled to Vancouver, BC, Miami, New York, LA, Sao Paulo, parts of South America, fashion shows, runways, off and on. It wasn't always steady, because I would start to look not well. I would start to look sick like an addict. And then I would get sober for a month, and I would clean up, and I would repost a headshot, and I'd get more work for a couple months. I'd make money, and then I would blow it all on drugs and friends. And I bought a friend a car when I was like 17 and never saw him again. He just drove off basically. And that's how I lived. I was my using, and the way that I spent money and the way that I treated people was very needy. I was very needy. I was looking for mommy and daddy for a long time. Through friends and other family members. And that my behavior was intense and pushed people away. So the kind of people that would tolerate me for a while were other drug addicts that just wanted drugs, and they would just numb out we all just numbed out together. And, you know, and I spent a little time homeless. I would break into abandoned buildings at the age of 16 and live in those for a week at a time. Like in Portland back in the mid 90s, it was a lot easier to be homeless and live in buildings that were abandoned. Now everything's rented or leased or owned. But back in the 90s, there was a lot of vacant space, and I would just take advantage of that. And so I wasn't horrible. I wasn't panhandling. I wasn't on the sidewalk sleeping. I was taken care of. But I was a resourceful person. I knew a lot of kids that were sleeping on the sidewalks, but I was resourceful. I had a gym membership and I would shower at the gym because I'm really vain. And I would work out if I had the strength to. And then I would be like, oh, okay, I've got some muscles and I'll be homeless and have muscles. It was weird. I was a weird kid. And, but yeah, I would do that chaotic Mach 3 lifestyle for a few years. And then all of a sudden I just found myself always broke. And I tried calling my parents a couple times and they were just like, we're not giving you any money. So thank God for that. My parents never gave me money while I was in my disease. And they wouldn't for many years, even after being sober. They did not trust me for a long time. And so when I ran out of resources, money, and shelter, I had to find a way to get out of it. And I would have to stay sober for people to help me. So in 2001 of November, I think it was like the day after Thanksgiving, I was just like, I wanted to stop. And I remember waking up on the floor of my bathroom with the shower water still on. So I must have fallen out of the bathtub in a drunken whatever haze. And I woke up just with my ribs they hurt. And I was like, what's going on? I'm looking up and this is no way to live. I'm 22. I look 42 and I'm 41 now. I look like an old man when I was in my early 20s for a minute. And I was like, and I'm vain. And I'm just like, I can't have this, man. This sucks. No one's talking to me. This is lame. This isn't the way life's supposed to be. So I just up and quit. I quit smoking. I quit drinking. I quit everything. I quit drinking. No coffee. I've had coffee ever since I was like a kid anymore. And I called my grandmother. I'm like, Grandma, I just got sober. I need to move home. And she laughed. She's like, you're not going to get sober. And I go, I need to come home. I can't live in the city and try to get sober. Everything I knew, I lived in Northwest Portland and we all lived right by each other. Everything was so tight. And they would be calling me constantly to see what I wanted to do. And I had to get rid of all my friends. I told them all I'm getting sober. And after I called my friend Ronnie and I called her. And from this day, no one ever called to see if I was good. They just knew Marques isn't partying anymore. Maybe he'll come back, but we never talked again. I hadn't seen them since. I never saw, it was weird. A lot of people will try to be friends with their friends and be sober and go to a birthday party and relapse. And I'm like, no, I'm not having it. So I moved home with my grandmother and I'm like, this is going to be a hard year, but it was a horrible time trying to get sober. And I didn't go to AA right away. I wouldn't go to my first AA meeting till a late May of 2009. So for 8 years of time, I stayed sober on my own, but it was miserable. Depression would come crashing on me. I became addicted to ice cream for a bit and I gained some weight. And I didn't know how to socialize sober. I hadn't done it in 7 years. So there were no friends. It was sad. My 20s were sad. They were very sad. And it's nothing to talk about. It's nothing fun. And I lived with my grandmother for a couple of years. It took me then. She would make my breakfast. She would make my bed. She would iron my clothes. She did everything for me like she was my nurse for 2 years. Because I couldn't do anything. I couldn't work. It was my brain and body didn't know how to work together. And so I just stayed home and watched bad TV. And she just kind of she always told me she knew I'd get better. So she wasn't in a hurry for me to leave or whatever. She just gave me time, which was amazing. She gave me food, shelter, and time. And as an addict, in my experience, that's all I needed. I just needed food and shelter so I could think, I could sleep, and I could just get better. Because if I was trying to get sober, homeless or whatever, or no food, no access to anything, I mean, I don't know if I would have stayed with it. But I went to my first meeting in 2009, but that was after going to NAMI and DBSA meetings. NAMI is National Alliance of Mental Illness, and DBSA is Depression Bipolar Support Alliance, because I was diagnosed with bipolar 2 disorder in 2007. So, because I started having these crazy hypomanic and depressive episodes starting when I was in college, when I went back to college in 2005. And by 2006, things just weren't right. And I was going to the hospital every month I couldn't sleep. I wasn't doing any drugs, and I wouldn't sleep for 3 days at a time. My adrenaline levels were spiking for days at a time, and I had no serotonin in my system. I couldn't sleep. My body couldn't regulate itself because it was regulating with alcohol and drugs. I would drink, so it would help me go to sleep. I would do the fun drugs to party, and I did that for 7 years, and my body just got attuned to it. It was wired for that living. And then I cut myself off, and my whole being was like, what are you doing? We can't survive without this stuff. And so I would get help with my chemical imbalance, and I'd get medication. That took about 1.5 years to get the right cocktail. And I take very low dosage of 2 medications, and it's been working ever since 2007-ish. And it's now 2020. And psychiatrists and therapy and all that stuff. I've tried it all. I mean, I got electroshock therapy twice in 2009, and that was weird. I mean, that's a whole other story. And electroshock therapy, I thought that was just in movies. I didn't know it was a real thing, and I got it, and and it helps, but it was, I don't know, long term, that's not the way I would go. But I went to my first meeting, and I was probably, I would say, suicidal for about 4 years. And I went to my first meeting of AA. It was a noon meeting. An all men's meeting at the Alano Club in Northwest Portland. And for the first time in 4 years, I didn't want to die. I was unhappy, and I was miserable and achy, but I didn't want to kill myself for the first time in 4 years. So I was like, okay. And I knew immediately that there's something with AA. So I just kept going. And that's how I started my path with 12-step recovery. And I mean, I've worked the steps with AA. I've worked the steps with Al-Anon, with CODA. I've tried a few other things, and I just started with ACA, and that's blown my world wide open. I mean, I'm going to sleep like a normal person. I'm going to bed around 10 o'clock, maybe 11 now, where I was always going to bed at 3 a.m., waking up at noon. I mean, for years, I was doing that a month ago. And the codependency thing, I've cut ties with people that were very toxic for me in the last 2 months, which freed me up with lots of time, because I'm not always on the phone or at lunch with someone, listening to them for 4 hours, tell the same story the last 10 years and not going anywhere with it. And it's been a trip. ACA and AA together for me, that's crazy. Like, I mean, I'm training for a triathlon. I'm swimming in the bay in the dark at 5 a.m. I'm swimming. It's like, what? I mean, I've always been a swimmer, but I've never swam in the bay. I've always been afraid of dark water. And biking and running, and I'm doing a half marathon this Sunday, tomorrow. And that's my first half marathon. I've never done this stuff. And I've started volunteering, and I run and walk dogs, and I'm just super busy, and run 2 businesses, and working out, just doing. But it's not a hypomanic state that I'm in. I've just found a way to manage my time, and I found a way to be of the max useful, like being useful to the people around me in a good way. It's not like, how can I help you? Da 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 da. It's not like this manic codependent behavior that I used to have. Now it's me just exercising my need to be in the world. I know the difference between me being very codependent and just giving back and working and making money and trading. And I know the difference between all that now. And that's where I'm at. I'm in a really good place right now. I'm doing better now, September, whatever date it is, September 5th or 6th. I'm doing better now than I ever have in my life. And I don't know, it's bizarre. It's COVID-19. San Francisco is I think it's one of the last major cities to come out of the whole lockdown. We're still locked down. A lot of people's careers have been completely squashed. I came from the hotel business, and I was a concierge up until March, and I got laid off, and I worked for Whole Foods for 6 weeks. And then I got a job running this property that I live in the Tenderloin. And I've been running a property full time. And then my uncle hired me on to run his luxury wallpaper business. So I'm like running 2 businesses, and it's like, no big deal. It's no big deal. And that's where I'm at. Things are really, really good. And Alcoholics Anonymous, Al-Anon, just ACA, CODA, eating my vegetables, getting sleep, drinking water. It's a lot that goes into, I think, getting better. And I don't rely on meetings of any kind or two people. I don't put all my eggs in one basket. I network and I help people. It's not all about me. I do help people in these 12-step programs. I have a couple sponsees, and I'm reading literature and working the yellow workbook in ACA and have a fellow traveler, all the code words they use in ACA. So I'm just doing what I got to do, because I don't ever want to go back to 2006, 2007. I don't ever want to go back to that world of depression and suicidal ideation, and just that's not for me. And I did it, and I got out of it, and this is where I am today. So I'll just stop with that. I talked for a while.
No, that was amazing. Oh my God. So I have so many questions. Thank you so much.
Of
You're a
course.
great speaker. I mean, nailed it. Um, man, and we were talking before we started about, I mean, some of us have done really well with COVID-19, right? And I had a little
Yeah,
bit of guilt about that. And, but it
I
was,
do.
yeah, right. And it was
I
so
did. Yeah.
interesting that you were talking about how well you're doing. And it just goes to show that, you know, if we utilize the tools that we have at our disposal, that we can, you know, cope in any situation, basically.
Yeah.
And
Well, not only cope, you can thrive,
thrive.
right? We don't
Yeah.
have to survive. We can do really well,
Yeah, we can
you
do really
know?
well.
Yeah.
It sounds like you're doing really well in San Francisco. Are you still going to a lot of meetings, or how many
Well, I mean,
meetings do you
I do the phone. There aren't a lot of meetings to go to. Every Sunday, there's this
Zoom?
big,
You don't do
the
Zoom
Zoom
meetings?
meetings.
Yeah.
Yeah, I do Zoom meetings. I'll do phone meetings. There's a couple in-person meetings here and there, and I go to one every Sunday at 11 a.m. But
Mm.
and I jog my dog, my Doberman Pinscher, to it every Sunday, and
Oh,
over at
nice.
Golden Gate Park. But so I'm working it. But yeah,
Yeah, I think another thing what was coming up for me when you were sharing is that, you know, it seems like a lot of us with like I was diagnosed with ADHD, and,
Mhm.
you know, a lot of us that have these issues, I feel like, you know, a lot of us use drugs and alcohol to self-medicate, right? We
Mhm.
felt better. And then
Yeah,
at some point those mechanisms didn't work anymore, and they started to cause more problems than they solve. But
yeah,
it's just so interesting. It's like we have this intense energy, and with the support of like the guidelines of 12-step programs, or, you know, the coping skills that we didn't get as kids, you know, once we're in
yeah,
recovery and we get these coping skills, it's like that intense energy that was like so wild that would, you know, make us spin out, is now
yeah,
channeled, right? And it seems
yeah,
like you
yeah.
have this channeled energy that you're like wildly productive, like in a healthy way.
Well, this is what I like to say about when it comes to the childhood, right? Like when you're facing your childhood, this is what I've learned. Like for years, I thought my parents were demons. But the thing
Did you
is that
really?
I was so angry at my parents.
Yeah.
But I realized, and a lot of people that we talked to, I do, you do, we all talk to all these people. And the parents do the best they can with what they're given. They
True.
do, and it's like
Yeah.
they just do the best that they can. Some people are not well and they're abusive and they enjoy it, but most parents are like, you got to think of like the generation. My parents are baby boomers. They're in their mid 60s. Their parents came from the silent
De-
generation,
the
and they
depression
had even
era.
less information. And it's
Yeah.
like, it's yes. Yeah, so I just stopped. When you stop blaming your parents, life really goes. It starts to take off.
Yeah, and I mean, yeah, so it's nice that we have so much more information now than our parents did, and we're
Yeah.
learning. Like I learned my coping skills as an adult. And then
Same. I'm
I
just
and you
now.
know, it's interesting. It's like my parents evolved over time as well, especially my mom. She was like the main person that had issues. she's
Yeah.
she's just really angry when I was growing up. But man, I want to be exactly like her when I grow up one day. She's like the
Nice.
most
That's great.
positive person I've ever met. But yeah, it's like it's looking back when we're kids, it's like, wow, I must have been really hard to deal with as a child. Did you have
Mhm.
that sort of reflection like, man, I don't know what I would have
Yeah.
done different in your shoes?
Yeah. It's like you give a kid who's like got this alcoholic addict gene, give them an extremely high IQ. and maybe they're creative, so they're bored in the regular education
Right.
system,
Yeah.
you're gonna have problems.
Yeah.
It's like, because I walk dogs a lot, so it's like I always relate things to dogs, and it would be like putting a black lab in a studio apartment with
Oh,
nothing to do.
yeah. That's
The
exactly
dog's
what it's
gonna
like.
tear apart that place.
Yeah.
So
The dog.
yeah.
I was told that you better give your dog a job or they'll find one.
Oh, for
God
sure,
forbid.
for sure.
Um, okay, so what's going on with your dad now? He's sober. You guys friends? I thought that was ironic. Did you guys get sober on the same day, different years?
Well, he got sober on my third birthday, my belly
Oh,
button
he got.
birthday.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, because my sobriety date is in November, and I was born in January.
Oh,
So
okay.
he got,
I got
yeah,
the dates mixed up. I thought
yeah,
he
he
got.
got
I thought you
sober on
guys.
my third birthday.
Oh, he did.
Yeah.
Are you guys friends?
Well, it's my father's a different story. Like my uncles and I on my dad's side of the family, we're all trying to find my dad. Like he's gone missing. So
Oh no.
we don't know. We've been trying to find him for like 4 months. We don't know where he is.
Oh
But
wow.
it's like somebody's still living in his apartment. His dog's still there. So we don't know. We're trying to figure it out because he's in Portland and we're here in the Bay Area.
Right. Yeah.
So yeah. So I
Okay.
mean, it's not everything turns out shiny all the
Well,
time.
they say in
So,
the end it'll be okay, and if it's not okay,
yeah.
it's not the end, right?
Yeah.
Um, okay, so you were diagnosed. I can't. I'm amazed that you were able to stay sober for 8 years. Like, what happened? I mean, without any support. I think it's so awesome that your grandma was so supportive of you for 2 years. It does take a couple of years for the
hmm
brain and the body to heal after
hmm
running so hard for so long.
Yeah, it takes a while.
That's amazing. But how did did you have like a moment of clarity? Did you like what
Yeah,
happened that you were like, I'm never doing this again?
yeah. I was sharing a condo. I was 22, and my roommate was like 26. She's a little older than me, and she owned the condo, and I rented a space from her. And I woke up the day after this party, and I was like, I gotta quit drinking. I gotta quit everything. But the weird thing was, this time lapsed. Like all of a sudden I was on the porch with a cigarette and a mimosa in my hand. I don't remember lighting the cigarette or making the mimosa. I was just sitting there and I'm about to take a drag and take a drink. And I'm like, whoa, how'd I get here? And that's when I knew I had a major problem. So I threw threw the alcohol out of the glass. I was like, ah, and I threw the cigarette and I was like, ah. And that's when I knew I had to call my grandmother. I called her. I was like, I got to come home. I don't even know what's happening to me. I'm losing track of time. It was
Well,
crazy.
and that was that the first, I mean, I have to ask you about your modeling career. You
Mhm.
kind of slipped that in. I was like, oh my
I
God, that
know it's
sounds so glamorous. You traveled the world as a model?
not all over the world. I mean, I went Canada, North America, like, right, and parts of South America, like the Americas.
Right.
But so
No. Do you have a
it was
blue steel look that you could give me? Just
no,
kidding.
no. I was in like a lot of runway cheesy stuff, and I was in a Binions commercial, and I was in Fred Meyer's Safeway ads, throwing a frisbee. It was nothing. It wasn't that
No runway.
sexy.
No runway.
And I
Okay.
did. I was up and down. I mean, I was up and down on random runways, but local shows around. It wasn't huge Ford modeling, but it
Oh,
paid the
okay.
bills for a minute.
That is pretty cool. Um, I don't know. Like that seems very fancy to be in print. I'd be like, check me out, man. I'm in
Yeah,
print.
it wasn't fancy, but oh
Not
well.
fancy.
I'm a little
Okay. But it
embarrassed
paid
by
the
it.
bills. Yeah.
Yeah,
That's awesome. Okay. So, um, grandma she takes you in and she
yeah,
gives you a couple years to get sober. What
yeah.
prompted you to go to a 12-step meeting?
Well, I was going to the depression bipolar support meetings, like people that would come into like most of these meetings for people with bipolar disorder or schizophrenia or dual something, they'll go to usually like basements of hospitals where there's a meeting a couple times a week. So I got online, I looked for it, and I found it. And at the time, I lived close to one, so I just started going to it. It was Tuesdays, every Tuesday at 7 p.m. So I did that for a couple of years, and we would just get into a big table, sitting around a circle in a big table, and just tell our stories about how we felt. But there were no 12 steps. There were no 12 traditions. It was just people dumping their problems and leaving feeling the same. There was no work being done.
There was no
So,
like
and I was like,
people weren't talking about any kind of
there was no
solution.
solution. It was doctors, medication. That's all there was, doctors and medication. And I
Ugh,
don't know if that's enough. For me, once I got a higher power in my life, that was when
yeah.
I had a real chance. I mean,
Okay.
thank God for medication, honestly, for me. But
Yeah.
when I found a higher power, it was like, oh, there is more. I didn't know there was more
You didn't
to
grow up
life.
with any kind of religion or concept
No,
of a
not
higher
really. It
power or
wasn't. It wasn't
anything?
put on me. I went to Catholic school for a couple years,
Oh,
right? So, but that was like, to me, that's like corporation religion. It's just
it
like, you
wasn't
believe in this.
personal to you?
No, not at all. I just
Okay.
like, it was, whoa, it was weird. No.
Yeah,
I didn't
I
like it.
remember going into the Catholic Church for the first time as a child and seeing the populated cross.
Yeah,
Populated meaning Jesus was on it. I was like,
yeah,
what is happening? Because I didn't grow up in a church like that. I grew up with a Presbyterian, which is very mellow, shall we say.
mild. Yeah,
It's very mild. Yeah, no
yeah, it's
populated
mild.
cross. So I was like, oh my God, there he is.
Yeah,
A little bit scary. I'm
yeah.
okay. So, what I wanted to ask you about was your experience going through that process as a dual diagnosis person seeking medical attention, because over the years that I've been sober, I've seen other people go through it, and it almost in some cases I almost felt like the medical community made them sicker or
Yeah.
worse. It was like
Well,
once they got sucked into, I had a friend who had a suicide attempt, and then she
mhm,
got um, placed into the hospital, where you would think that would be a good place, but she seemed to get worse once she got
mhm,
wrapped up in the system. Is that
right.
your experience, or why
Well,
does that
so
happen?
it was weird. Well, because the reason why I got worse is because I was put on medication trials. So they would put me on medication and take me off if it didn't work. So in a year and a half time frame, I was on Xanax. They put me on lithium. They put me on Seroquel, Abilify. Um, what was it? Klonopin. I was on, not all at once, but we would try things for a month at a time. So my brain chemistry and my body are like freaking out. And then like I was on Klonopin for a month, and I had to go through the withdrawals of it because it's so addicting. Like
Oh,
it was the worst withdrawals I've ever been on in my life. Was the Klonopin withdrawals. Benzo withdrawals are the worst. It's
um,
horrible.
sorry to interrupt you, but I'm
Yeah.
so confused. So you were going in, they knew that you had drug and alcohol abuse issues,
Mhm.
and they gave you Klonopin.
Yeah, they do it with a lot of people that are going that I know a lot of people in AA that are on Klonopin every day now, right now. A lot of people are on benzos as like an antidepressant and an anti-anxiety medication.
Anti-anxiety, yeah. How do
Yeah.
you feel about that?
How do I feel about
I
it?
mean, is that a good thing in your experience? I mean, you've been sober a long time now, and you're
Yeah,
like in that world, but outside looking in,
yeah,
it makes me, sometimes it worries me. Like, I'm not a doctor and I don't play
yeah.
one on the internet.
I mean, I was put on these minimal doses of everything, but I know people that are on like huge doses, and I'm like 10 milligrams. I was on 1.5, or something. I'm like, you're on 10 milligrams of Klonopin. That'll put down a horse. That'll put down a
Whoa.
horse. And you're driving and going to work on this. So this is what I think. I think it depends on the doctor. I had a great psychiatrist who the very last thing we did was try medication. For a year, we tried just talk therapy, and I was still sinking and sinking. And so um, we tried minimal doses of everything. Like a lot of people I've noticed, they'll tell me their dosage, and I'm like, wow, you're on 4 times what I tried. So I think some doctors just want to give out the medication because they're paid by that company,
Oh my God, that's
which is,
terrible.
I mean, now we're getting into politics, and that's scary.
Yeah.
It's like it's but that's what I saw. I just saw some doctors were being paid to do it, and some doctors were like, this is a last case scenario. And I had that situation. So, and then I was lucky to just get on a small dose just to keep me balanced,
Right. It was like
rather than
it was like a
medicating.
safety net, right?
Yeah. So I
Yeah.
was really lucky.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. So at the end of the day, I really don't have any judgment as to what people do. I just get worried when I see people like going
Yeah.
through that process of testing out what works for you is such a painful time.
Yeah, it was
and
bad.
requires a lot of support and a
Yeah.
team of people, typically, right? A team of
Yeah.
people to get you to a place. So you were suicidal for 4 years. What made the
Yeah.
difference for you that
Well,
you got to the
the
other
difference
side?
the difference for me was I started going to AA meetings, and I learned that not only was I not alone, because I learned with the mental illness, like the groups, like the depression bipolar support alliance meetings that I went to, I learned there that I wasn't alone. But in AA and all the other groups, I learned that I wasn't alone, and that there were steps and boundaries. There were these foundational tools that I could use, and that's where I learned them. But the other meetings that I went to, there were no tools to learn. There was no literature, you know. So the literature and talking to people that have been through the hell, and this is how they got out, and they had an example for me to follow. That's what really turned me around, big time.
Just having an example of that's amazing. Yeah, some actionable tools. What kind of things do you do? Well, it sounds like you do all kinds of things. Are you doing prayer, meditation? You're obviously doing lots of service and physical
Yeah,
activity. And
yeah, yeah. I pray all the time. I mean, I go through these phases of prayer. Like the past 6 months, I've been praying a lot, like a couple times a day. But I mean, meditation. I've been meditating since I was 16. But the meditation has changed as I get older and more developed, and my meditations are more focused on something. And plus, I have an uncle on my dad's side that lives in Oakland, and he has a degree in like transcendental meditation. He has a 4 year
oh my
degree,
God,
so he's teaching me stuff.
that is so
So
cool.
yeah, we connected a few months ago, like for the first time ever. I never met him before. And then so he's been kind of like a spiritual guide for me. And yeah, I
This is
do a
your
lot of
dad's
stuff.
brother?
My dad's side, yeah.
That's interesting. So did you discover him when when your dad went missing?
Yeah, for the most part, we started talking because we're like, we got to find your dad. I'm like, okay. And then we started connecting. And I have another uncle that's on my dad's side that I've known him since 2012. We connected in 2012. And I'm the
Wow.
one. He's the one that I run his business, his wallpaper
Oh, the
business. And
wallpaper.
yeah, and all the Marchands were all in different 12-step programs. Everybody's in recovery on my dad's side.
Well,
Everybody.
yeah. I mean, mental illness is a family disease, right? It's definitely
Yeah,
hereditary, and a lot of people
for
develop
sure.
addiction issues because they don't have the coping skills that you do now.
Yeah.
Um, we were kind of joking around about recovery. I know you've done recovery meetings on both coasts, and we were kind of
Hmm.
talking about the differences in meetings. Like I moved a year ago, and I had always heard, I've been sober a long time, and I always heard people who left, like I got sober in the Bay Area, and people would leave and come back and be like, oh, they don't do it right
Yeah.
everywhere, everywhere. And
Yeah.
then I was like, okay, I'll be prepared for that. So I come out to Idaho, and it's like, yeah, they do it different. But the
They
one
do
thing
things
that
different.
saved me was that I walked into a room and they started reading the literature right out of the book. And I was like, oh my God, I'll be fine. But
Hmm.
they do it different. Like in San Jose, you get called on, like the chairperson is the person who's, tells their story, and then they pick a
Hmm.
topic and they call on people to
Yeah.
share, and they have a podium and people walk up to the front. It's a whole thing.
Yeah.
How are they doing it in San Francisco these days?
San Francisco specifically, because I've been to meetings in San Jose and Marin,
Yeah.
and but San Francisco, it's they're pretty fluffy here. It's like they
What,
give you
what does that
almost,
mean?
they're just, like you could be, let's say you're the drunk person that's throwing a chair and yelling and cursing in the meeting, right? And you're doing that. And in San Francisco, it's just kind of like the culture is to let him do it, let him get through it. And I'm like, where I'm from, you bring him outside and talk to him. You establish boundaries. But in San Francisco, everybody's this wannabe kind of social worker, and they're just like, they're too nice here. It's like they're just too nice here in
I
San
have
Francisco,
never
I would say.
I have never experienced that.
I've seen some crazy stuff, and I'm like, what? Just remove him from the room. But
Yeah.
I've been to meetings all over, and it's like a lot of places like, just let him soothe himself. I'm like, he's incapable. Like, remove him
Right?
from the room
He is
and talk
insane.
to him. Yeah. So I've been known as kind of grouchy and the bully of San Francisco. I'm like, no, we're going to remove him. and it'll
So
get,
you're
yeah,
you're displaying healthy boundaries and they don't like
yeah,
it.
yeah. And a lot of the meetings that I've been to here just don't, they're not comfortable with that. They get kind of prickly, and you know what I mean?
Girl,
I don't
hey,
know.
that's
It's a
funny.
strange, I've been here for almost 5 years and I'm not used to it still. I'm like, what?
I hear that there's a lot of volunteer meetings. Like people will share their story and then they turn it over to the rest of the. Do they still do like experience, strength, and hope, and then they turn
Yeah,
it over to the group?
yeah, they'll do that. Usually, yeah, usually it's like, okay, the floor is open and people will just, I'll talk, which
Yeah. Do they
whatever.
raise their hand or they just start popping off?
It's a mix. Sometimes they'll mix. Sometimes they'll raise their hand. Sometimes they'll just be like, "My name's Bob," and they'll start
Yeah.
talking.
Yeah.
So
That's how they did it. I hear people would start popping off, or sometimes there'd be these long, awkward silences where nobody's
yeah,
sharing. And I'm like, what is happening?
yeah. And I love that, like, the meeting will be, this is a non, there's no crosstalk in this meeting, but still everybody's still
Everybody
crosstalk.
does it.
It's like not to crosstalk, and then they
But
continue, and
yeah,
I'm like, what? What are you doing?
I love those meetings where they're like, oh, let's not discuss any non AA approved
Yeah.
literature. So I'll do some I'm such a renegade. Every once in a while I'll be like, oh my gosh, I'm reading this amazing book that's called The Obstacle is Away, but I can't tell you since it's not
Yeah. That's
so
funny.
obnoxious. Of Course in Miracles, it's amazing, but I can't tell you about it.
No, one story I'll give real quick is when I lived in Key West for about a year. And so, I mean, Key West is it's by all the Caribbean islands, right? So I got to go to Jamaica, and
Ooh.
I got to go all over. All the islands are so close. And I went to Cuba for 3 days. And this was the summer of 2016. And I went to Cuba, and there was a meeting there. It was fascinating, but I didn't, the meeting was all in Spanish, but it was a transgender AA meeting, but it was also for people that were recovering from the Catholic Church. So it was an AA
Oh,
meeting for transgenders that were also recovering from the Catholic Church.
that's a
And I
very
went to this meeting.
specific niche.
It was so wild. It was, to this day, the most wild meeting. I didn't know what they were saying. I could get a feel for it when it was AA related, but then like everybody was crying. Everybody cried. And I was sitting there with a buddy of mine, and we're just kind of like,
I don't know what's
let's just sit
happening.
here and just watch it happen. That was the most fascinating meeting.
That sounds
That was
now I
fascinating.
want to go to Cuba
Yeah,
to the
Cuba's a
transgender.
trip. But in Cuba, the government promotes AA because they've seen their theft and their crime drop because of Alcoholics Anonymous.
Isn't that
So the
amazing?
government pushes it, like has flyers all over Cuba about AA.
Wow.
Yeah, it's a
I'm all
trip.
about promotion, as you know.
Yeah, I just think it's funny.
I'm all about promotion. I know
Yeah.
there's certain things. How did you get like when you wrote your book and stuff and started talking about how 12-step programs and stuff, how did you get past the traditions where that's like you're supposed to maintain your anonymity?
I don't know. I just do it. I mean, this is my life, and
Yeah.
this is my life. And it's like, I mean, it's not that I don't care or I'm being disrespectful, but it's like, this is how I got sober. And
Yeah.
mental illness and addiction is a crazy huge problem in the world,
Huge.
and
Huge.
there's
People are dying every day.
people are dying, and you have basic information like families are like, what do we do with our son? And it's like, well, and then I tell them how I got sober. And but I mean, what, I don't know, I just don't understand. A lot of people have a problem with me, like, pitching my book and doing my thing, and I'm
Hmm.
just, I'm also an entrepreneur.
Yeah.
I'm a red-blooded American male, and I want to be
Yeah.
successful, but this is just one of the things that I do. But I am passionate about this,
Yeah.
and I've helped a lot of people. I don't know how many, but I know I've helped a lot of people.
Oh, for
So,
sure.
and I'm not,
Yeah, no, I
sorry.
love it. I love that you're I mean, listen, obviously I recover out loud, as they say.
Yeah.
Because I mean, I forget what the stats were just for opiates. I think there was like 70,000 deaths
Mhm.
in a single year. It's like we
Yeah.
talk about, and then I don't even know how many millions of people die from alcoholism every year. So I
Yeah.
get that there needs to be and then there's a very interesting sober curious movement, and there are some people who really love the anonymity. People with like professional careers, there's just seems to be a place for all of it. Like the
Sure.
people who need the privacy and protection and security of anonymity. And then there needs to be those of us who are totally out there with our
Yeah.
recoveries so that we can assure people to the solutions that they need, don't you think?
Yeah. Oh yeah. I tell people in the meetings if I share, or even my friends in my social circle in recovery, I'm like, look, I live out loud. This is just my being. This is what I do. If you're
Yeah.
not comfortable with it, then and you need to do what you need to do. Just either don't be my friend. You have options. Like I'm not going to come out you and go, hey, look, this is Bob Smith. I'm
Yeah.
not doing that.
No,
This
no,
I'm
don't
just
out anyone
focusing.
else.
Yeah, I'm just focusing on my thing. But if you're not comfortable with it, you have the option to stay away from me as far and as long as you want.
Are you
It's
really
like
getting any
everybody has the
backlash?
option.
People are giving you a hard time about it?
Not a lot, not a lot. A couple people.
Yeah.
They tend to be older people in their 60s and 70s,
Yeah.
and they tend to be chain smokers, out of shape. Like they just tend to be miserable people that are the ones that are giving me flack. It's weird. I'm like,
Yeah.
it just tends to be this certain specific person that has a problem with it. And it's
Yeah.
always the unhappy, dusty person with 40 years that's miserable. So I'm
Yeah.
like, dude, okay, we're just
You're
on a
all,
different planet.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
It's
Yeah.
okay.
It's okay. Yeah. There's a path for everyone.
Yeah.
No, that's very cool. I feel like we're coming up on our time here. But I have a lightning round of questions. You want to play?
All right.
Woohoo. Did I prepare you for these?
No, that's
Okay,
fine.
good. Well, okay, it'll be super fun then. So I usually start, what's your favorite quit lit book?
My favorite what?
Quit drinking literature besides your own?
Oh gosh. My favorite,
What's your favorite book? Sorry, that was a rude way to
yeah,
ask that question.
my favorite book right now is Can't Hurt Me by David Goggins, the retired Navy SEAL.
I love David
Yeah,
Goggins. You
yes.
follow him on
Yeah,
Instagram by any chance?
I don't, but I've talked to him once. I've gotten to talk to
What?
him over the phone.
You
And
did?
yeah, I got a hold of him and it took me a month and a half. And he yelled at me on the phone.
Why?
And like, I mean, I can't even repeat what he said to me because it's your show, but it was
Oh.
just like, it's the reason why I'm training to become a triathlete. Like last month I wasn't training and I talked to him 3 weeks ago and I was like,
You
he
talked to him
changed
3
my
weeks
life.
ago?
I talked to him 3 weeks ago. Yeah, I read his book a month ago, and
Oh my God, he's
or no,
amazing.
2 months ago. And then I just ever since then I was like emailing and trying to find ways to talk to him to get his advice on something. And he just yelled at me. He didn't even give me advice. He just yelled at me over the phone. That's all I needed.
What did he
But
say? You can swear.
he's like,
I
he's
know he
like,
says stay
whatever
hard,
you're,
motherfucker, all the time.
well, aside from that, he's like, whatever it is that he's like, I can't even make sense of what you're trying to say. You need to quit being a pussy, quit worrying about recovery time and just run. And he got off and he hung up. And I was like,
Then he hung up.
okay. Yeah, he's 4 years older than me. So I'll just listen to him. I'm like, okay. He's 45, 46. I'm like,
He
okay,
is
cool. I'll quit.
amazing.
Yeah. He just said, quit whining.
He responded to me on social media one time because I just love him, and I forgot what I said to him. I gave him some kind of praise, and he acknowledged me. I was like, oh my God, David Goggins knows I
Yeah.
exist.
He's
I have
awesome.
arrived.
Yeah, he's awesome.
Can't hurt me now. Okay, yeah, I
Yeah.
have his book on Audible. My husband, who never listens to anything, listened to his book and loved it.
It's
So
fascinating.
fascinating story. Okay, thank you. That's an amazing book. Do you have any other favorite books?
I'm reading, gosh, what's it called? There's a guy named Rich Roll,
Oh
last
yeah,
name Roll. Rich Roll.
he's got a really popular podcast.
Huge. And his book is like Seeking Ultra or something Ultra. And
Yeah,
I'm
he's
just
an
now
ultra
starting
runner.
that. Oh yeah. He's like, he's the healthiest vegan in the world or whatever. It's like,
Yeah.
yeah, he's like in his mid 50s and he's in better shape than I'll ever be.
Yeah,
Yeah.
his friend Mishka, oh God, I'm blanking on his last name. He was a guest on my podcast, has been on Rich Roll's podcast many times.
Mhm.
Okay, so Rich Roll has a book that you like. What's it called?
Yeah, it's like Seeking Ultra, I think.
Okay, I'll look it up
Yeah.
and put it in the show notes. I
Yeah.
put all these books in the show notes.
Yeah,
I love
it's pretty
books. I'm
good.
obsessed.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, Seeking Ultra. Okay, do you have a I wish I could speak today. Go to mantra or quote that you live by? Or do you have like,
Gosh, no.
no.
No, I don't.
Well, so
my
obviously
thing is
mine is
that,
one day at a time, right,
yeah,
Odette?
my thing lately has just been, what would my Uncle Arthur do?
Oh, that's
My
sweet.
Uncle Arthur, it's like, he's
What would
amazing.
Arthur
He's the one
do?
that's just, he's my spiritual guru. I don't even believe in gurus, but
You
he's
look
my
up to
man.
him. Yeah, he's your inspiration right now. I love
Yeah,
it.
he's inspiring.
There are a ton of cliches and stuff that are super
Yeah,
helpful.
yeah, there are.
Do you have any program mantras or
Mine is just,
mantra is a bad word, but you know,
my big thing is think, but upside down,
what do you mean?
right? The think sign, but when you turn it upside down, it just means stop thinking.
It makes no
Yeah,
sense, so stop thinking.
yeah, just stop thinking.
Okay, that's fair. Do you have a regular self-care recovery routine? Like, do you attend a certain number of meetings and
Mm,
start your day with prayer or meditation, or
yeah.
what is your, do you have
Um,
a,
well, I don't do everything at the same time, but I mean, I pray probably twice a day. I pray once in the morning. I pray once when I wake up. Usually it's like, God, just help me. It's usually a prayer for me.
of course, how
I
much
do
days
pray for
over?
myself. And
There's nothing
then
wrong with
in the
that.
afternoon around 2 o'clock, I pray for just anybody that comes to my mind. Like I have a couple of acquaintances that are going through a hard time. And I'm like, can you please help these people? I
Mm.
usually pray for a couple of people in the middle of the day. That's just my thing.
No, I like
And
it. I
then,
mean that you have to put the oxygen mask on yourself first. So
yeah, yeah,
ain't nothing wrong with that.
yeah. And I meditate half an hour a day, usually around 4 o'clock.
In the afternoon, oh, that's interesting.
Yeah,
I
I just break it
usually
up.
I usually do like 10 minutes in the morning, but I started adding a second one around 2 because I start getting like little burnout. So
Yeah.
maybe like an
Well,
afternoon rest.
I've been jogging at like 5 in the morning. So I've just been like running in the morning when no one's awake, especially in a town like
Oh,
San Francisco, running at 5 or 5:30 in the morning. That's amazing. No one's around. No one's around.
I
It's so
love the
great.
morning. Oh,
Yeah.
that's
I just
beautiful.
started it. I used to I was going to bed at 3 a.m., 4 a.m. for years.
Wow.
So
Um, is running helping you sleep better?
yes, yes.
Nice.
Running has changed my life. It's changed everything.
How much are you sleeping now?
Well, I've always gotten a lot of sleep, but it's just getting me to sleep. But I've always
Oh,
gotten like 9 hours of sleep, but it's just
okay.
getting me there.
Falling asleep is hard. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. I know a
it's
lot of people
horrible.
struggle with that.
Hmm.
Um, what's the one thing you wish you knew when you first got sober?
It was going to take a long time,
That it
and
was
I'd
going
be
to take a
okay.
while. And it was
It
going
was
to
going
be
to take it
okay.
was going to take a long, long time, and that I would be okay. If someone said, "Marcus, you're going to live through all this, just you're going to be fine," I would have felt so much better. It's
Oh,
like I would have felt so much better knowing I was still going to be alive in 15 years or whatever.
right.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you've been through a lot. 19 years you've been sober?
Yeah. Almost. I'll have 19 years in November.
In November.
Yeah.
That's amazing. What a journey that you've had. I'm so glad that you're doing so well now. And I know
Thanks.
you're doing a lot to help others. These books you have are, where's your book available? Is it on Amazon?
On Amazon. Yeah. Amazon.
Okay. I'll definitely leave links to it in the show notes
Yeah.
for sure. It's such a pleasure to talk to you. You're
Thank
such
you.
a fun person.
Thanks,
I'm
Emily.
glad you're doing so well, and I'm sure your book is going to help tons of people.
Thank you. Thank you so
Thank you
much.
so
It
much
was
for
great
your
meeting you too.
time. Thank
Yeah.
you. Have a great
Thank you.
day.
Bye bye.
Bye.